Hey babes, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you are new. For those that don't know me, my name is Brandy. I am the host of the Be Real Babe Show, a spinoff of the Be Real Babe podcast. And today, you guys, it is Monday, so that means it's time to keep up with Canada. And I have 3 different stories for you today. One that's serious, and then another one that's super serious, and one that's not serious at all, but I find kind of interesting and comical, and where we put some of our taxpayers' dollars to for what the government decides to focus on and what they don't. But I digress. Either way, I'm just here to report some news, and I want it to be known, to make it clear that I do in fact try to find positive news stories to bring to this segment, and unfortunately that doesn't exist. I have scrolled through pages and pages every single time being like, okay, bring some positive Canadian news, and I just can't find it. So I guess we leave the positive on the podcast, where we have amazing guests come on every Friday on Apple, Spotify, or Rumble if you want to watch some more uplifting. But today, we're going to catch up on, so we're going to have 3 different stories today. Like I said, one that's not so serious, but actually involves the industry that I work in. The second one, we're going to do a follow-up on an absolute travesty that happened at the Lapu Lapu Festival this year, and the lack of government support. And then the last topic we're going to talk about today is an article that I found kind of alarming that I want to bring to you guys, but I don't know, it's about our current government and the budgets and how the PBO felt about that and all those thoughts. I also have a co-host today that is extremely needy. I'd like to welcome Jackson to the show. I'm not sure how long he'll last, but hopefully you heard his purrs, and apologies if he's distracting. So if you're interested in listening to that, stick around and we'll jump right in. All right, guys. So as mentioned, 3 different stories with my co-host Jackson here. Now he's done. He's over it. He doesn't want to hear about the stories. Okay, so 3 stories. One I just thought kind of interesting. And like I said, I actually truly do try to find positive stories. I'm like, oh, can we find some wins here in Canada in the news? And for one, I'm blocked on so many different ways to finding news. That's not just me, that's all Canadians. So great, love that. At the same time, this just doesn't exist. So like I said, on the podcast, there's way more positive energy over there. It seems like YouTube, I'm just going to be talking about the tea and the drama in the country and on the internet. So, but this one I found was kind of a light story, to be honest with you. But I also think it's kind of interesting because considering what's out there in the black market when it comes to cannabis, that the regulated industry really gets harped on. And I just feel like sometimes some services and money and funds would be better spent elsewhere and not worrying about these things. But let's see. This came out October 4th, 2025. The CTV: THC levels too high. Health Canada recalls cannabis products. Health Canada is recalling a brand of cannabis sold in several provinces due to inaccurate levels of THC, the main psychoactive compound in cannabis listed on the packaging. According to a Health Canada recall alert, packages of Wintermint Chillos cannabis extract and cinnamon Chillos cannabis extract contain higher THC levels than what is stated on the pouch's labels. So what this actually looks like to me is it looks like they are edibles. Yeah, they look like they're edibles. So when they're saying cannabis extract, the extract in the cannabis, because these don't look like vape carts and they're not saying you smoke it. Oh yeah, an image from the front and the back package of gummies recalled. So it's just interesting that they keep calling it cannabis extract. We just call it gummies. Anyways, and I always found this interesting. There was actually a bunch of recalls. I think it was on Monster or Rain or some of those too for Health Canada, and it was just because the packaging didn't say French. So, when there are recalls, make sure you look into them, because obviously some of them are massive health concerns, and sometimes it's just that there's just a mislabeled thing. And hey, for this one, a lot of people complain that 10 milligrams is the most that you can get in edibles here in Canada in a single package. And a lot of people complain about that because on the black market, you could get hundreds of milligrams. And so that's why I think it's not funny, because it's not, because especially new people coming to the industry and they're just wanting to have a low dose. Like, I don't think that cannabis or edibles or anything you should mess with. I think if you're going to do it recreationally or medicinally, you should start low. You can always add more, but you can't really take back, although it's not like a pharmaceutical sometimes that can last, or like a real recreational, like, mushrooms that could last for 10 to 12 hours. But I think when you're ever experimenting with anything, you should always start light. And that's not me recommending going to do cannabis, but if you're ever going to, you want to try edibles, I do think you should start small. And I do think we need to be careful when it comes to packaging, because we don't want people to react and have bad experiences, obviously. But this is just, it's just, and maybe people will absolutely react to 10 milligrams. But I just think it's interesting because, people that are taking stuff on the black market that are 10 times that. And it's really, when it comes to cannabis, you're not going to die. You're just going to probably be really goofy and tired after, and crash out after you eat a bunch of food. Just my experience. The recalled products were sold in Alberta, BC, Manitoba, and Ontario. The alert warns that pouches in which the products were sold and contained over 10 milligrams of THC, and that there's significant unit-to-unit of variability of THC levels between pouches. The elevated and inconsistent levels of THC in each pouch may make it difficult to be informed in deciding regarding your cannabis use, the statement reads. This may lead to over-intoxication and temporarily adverse health consequences according to the THC overdose. Some symptoms can include confusion, disorganized thinking, physical and mental impairment, anxiety, fear or panic, decreased blood pressure, and elevated heart rate. In some cases, THC overdose can lead to psychotic episodes characterized as paranoia, delusion, or hallucinations. Anyone in possession of these recalled products is asked to stop using them, return to the store where they were bought or dispose of them safely, and keep them away from children and youth, where children and youth might access them. Since 2018, when cannabis was legalized in Canada, several cannabis products have been recalled due to incorrect THC values on the label, which again, I totally believe that we need to be careful. Totally, 100%. At the same time, not trying to be this way, but people need to take it slow and light always, but they could just go to the black market and get things worse. And we did in the past, right? So as much as I love this and I think we do need to be informed, I also think like it's kind of crazy that you're worried about this when you're straight up like giving out crack pipes and like fucking vending machines outside of the hospitals where there's probably recovering addicts, which is the last thing that they see. But you're worried about there being a little bit more than 10 milligrams THC. Like I get it, but like I don't get it, So I thought that one was interesting. So that one was my funny light one for today, which again, I don't think it's funny or light because I do think that there are people that do have negative effects with cannabis and there has been psychosis and all that. I'm not dismissing any of that. I'm just saying like, can we worry about the fucking like actual narcotics and huge stuff like that we're doing, like the opioid crisis? Maybe just a thought, maybe move some funds over to that instead of worrying about regulating cannabis as much. Just my thought. Okay, so next story is a story that I actually talked about on YouTube about, well, it was April 28th, 2025. That's not when the incident happened, but that's when I reported it on YouTube. There was just a huge moment of crime, which continually happens in Vancouver, to be honest, growing up on the island. That is something that I've always, not trying to be rude. I'm not throwing shade at anybody from Vancouver, but I definitely, when people are like, oh, you're from Vancouver, I'm like, I'm from the island, and I'm not trying to be that way. It's just I grew up with knowing Vancouver to be a little bit more violent, a little bit more crime forward, but there was a whole bunch that was going on at the same time. So I made a whole episode on that. You can go back to April 28th, 2025, and I said crime rates are insane. Let's see, the title is Crime in Vancouver is Getting Out of Hand. Yeah, so that's on there. But I want to do a follow-up on that tragedy because I was just absolutely devastated when this happened. I absolutely cannot handle when the government says that they're going to be there and then they're not. And again, I think this might be one of those situations. I'm not involved in it, but I thought it was important to bring this up because I feel like, especially in this kind of generation in the world that we live in, it's like one news title onto the next. And I really wanted to follow up on stories, and this is one of the ones that I want to follow up on, so it made sense to do that for this episode. So let's go in and see what I'm talking about if you don't know and you don't want to go back to the other episode in April. Let's start from here. So where's the care? Group says Lapu Lapu victims need more government support. This is from October 3rd. So the community group Filipino BC is calling on all levels of government to step up and commit direct and long-term funding to help the victims of the Lapu Lapu Festival and their families. According to the organization, no level of government has committed to dedicate funding for programs or services to aid those most affected by the April 26th tragedy. 11 people were killed and a dozen more injured when an SUV drove into the crowd at the Lapu Lapu Festival in Vancouver. I think we're still hearing that the acuity of need for basics is still quite high. Christina Corpin-Mose, executive director of the Filipino BC, told Global News. I think also what we've noticed is that by and large, it has been the community that has led the emergency and recovery response. And so while the United Way fundraised $2 million to fund 40 charities and nonprofits, there's still really a role that the government needs to play in leaning in instead of waiting for communities and nonprofits to reach out. Corpin-Mose says families affected by the tragedy are struggling to pay rent, put food on the table, and access culturally appropriate mental health supports. She said she has not been able to have a serious conversation with the provincial government or the city of Vancouver. This is where the government really needs to have its ears to the pavement to hear what's happening on the ground, she added. Agreed. Following the tragedy, people around the world stepped up to donate $2 million for the United Way Cap was strong fund. Corpin Mose told Global News that the money raised directly supported those most impacted, along with community programs, but there were many people present that day who would not be classified as the most heavily impacted victims. We also have hundreds of people who were witnesses of that day, she said. We have people in the neighborhood who need access to support. We have, people who have held victims' hands as they died. These people also need assistance and they don't necessarily qualify for EI or these other benefit programs. In a statement to Global News, the City of Vancouver said it has helped facilitate conversations between victims, families, and community organizations and the Vancouver Police Department. While the City of Vancouver does not have the jurisdiction to plan and deliver mental health services, the city does not already provide funding towards victim services throughout the Vancouver. The city does already provide funding towards victim services through the Vancouver Police Department, the statement read. The city has expressed a strong interest in seeing community-directed programming to support victims, their families, and impacted community members. The most appropriate channel for funding requests for this nature in city social cultural granting program. The city says it encourages Filipino BC to apply to the program if they wish. BC Solicitor General Nina Kreger confirmed to Global News on Friday that 180 claims have been paid through the ICBC to the amount of $2 million. She said 95 applications have been received through the province's Victim of Crime program and 93 of those have been approved. Corbin Mose said that they want to see a more coordinated approach across levels of government. Folks were really at the table early on and nothing really came of it, she said. And so I think since then, we've heard a lot of promises, politicians coming through, taking photographs, telling them how the Filipino community is a community that cares for the people, so we're going to care for them. Where's that care, right? And I think the absence is noticeable now that we're 5 months out and we still have people who can't afford basic resources. This is why I want to talk about it, right? Again, these promised, and I'm not saying this isn't political who's better than the other. It's just, this is where some people like myself included get frustrated. I absolutely think these services need to be had, but it always seems like there's mismanagement when you hear from the people that need it, they're not being supported. And again, I'm not a part of it, so please sound off in the comments if there's something that would be preventing why these individuals aren't getting help, especially with mental health care, which is something I truly do not understand. If we know that there's a mental health problem, why aren't there more things or stuff written in legislation or through these programs to help for stuff like that? Because these are massively traumatic events that are happening, and to the point, it's not just obviously it's affecting those that have lost loved ones, but they're also the wave of what happens to anybody that was there witnessing it, anybody that lost a family member. Where are the supports? And it's so beautiful that there are communities that are wrapping themselves around each other, but this is the money that I think we all think our taxes are going to, like where it should be going to, and it doesn't sound like it is exactly. But if you've heard otherwise, please let me know. But I also wanted to bring out the fact that it sounds like there's some support, but again, not to the extent that it's needed. And again, I just love to know why our money is going across into other countries. And one day I'm not going to be able to say that on here and not helping communities like this that are in our communities suffering right now that should be getting help. So there's that. If you want to go donate, you can go on GoFundMe. I'm sure there's families that have stuff across the board there if that's something that you're interested in putting your money towards. But just keeping everyone's thoughts in your prayers, and document this stuff, clock this stuff when you're wanting to vote next local, provincial time. Sometimes it feels like federal, there's no point, but these are things that should be clocked on where things are saying their support and it's not actually coming through. There's that one. Okay, on to the next one that is alarming. Now, I haven't been really talking about politics as much on this channel over the last couple months. That's just for most of my mental health. I really was trying to be positive, to be honest. I'm like, hey, you know what, girly, you have criticized the Liberal government for the last couple of years. I'm not saying that I'm not continue, but like maybe let's take a break and let's just see, people are telling you you're an idiot and you're wrong. So sit back and let's see. And to be honest, guys, I'm not seeing it. I'm not getting it. And this is kind of alarming. So I found this article, as one does, and I wanted to bring it to you guys today. It's written by Trevor Tombe. I'm so sorry if I butcher your name. I'm terrible. This came out October 1st, and it is the budget warning that Canada cannot ignore. Again, you guys, I'm trying to remain optimistic because I think that's better for my mental health, but we're struggling here. So let's get into this article. Canada's Parliamentary Budget Officer attracted significant attention and headlines last week with a report on Canada's economic and fiscal outlook. He didn't mince words, calling the federal situation both shocking and unsustainable. The PBO analysts found that the federal budget deficit would grow beyond previous projections. From the total of just over 132 billion between 2025 and 2028 that was projected in the budget of 2024 to nearly 255 billion now projected for those years. Much of this is driven by a considerable decline in federal tax revenues from personal income tax cut and other measures, as well as even larger increases in federal program spending. Obviously not to help some victims. Total operating spending alone, excluding many federal transfers, is projected to be more than 10 billion per year higher than previously anticipated. Okay, I'm again gonna try to be not super biased. I'm gonna try and come at this from a I don't understand point of view, but I thought that y'all voted the finance guy in. But now he's gonna be worse than the government before him by a lot. And that's not even everything. Let's continue. And it gets worse. These projections don't count many of the government's own campaign platform commitments, including increasing military spending. Adding unannounced measures back into the PBO estimates, I find cumulative deficits over the next 4 years to exceed 360 billion, almost triple what last year's budget anticipated. A larger deficit means increased borrowing and rising interest costs. The PBO projections indicate that interest costs alone may consume 14 cents on every dollar in the government revenue by 2030, or nearly 16 cents on every dollar in taxes. That's roughly double where we were before the pandemic and the highest in nearly 2 decades. Again, don't know. Stupid when it comes to money, stupid with my own money, but at least it's my money, right? Why is this happening? Was there possibly a way that we could have fixed some of this by getting to work over the last couple months? Of course, it's going to be blamed on tariffs and it's Trump's fault and all this and all that, because it's always somebody else's fault, right? I get it. I used to think that way too when I used to get my credit card statements and my bank account being like, who fucking did this? Who's the asshole spending all this money that they shouldn't be? And turns out once you start doing a budget and you start becoming, financially responsible and shit, you start seeing, oh my God, it's me. Not our government. No, nay. It's all our fault. It's Trump's fault. It's climate change. But even more concerning is the federal debt is now set to grow at a faster rate than the economy. In testimony to parliamentary committee last week, the PBO noted that this was the first time in 30 years he had seen a projection where this key measure of fiscal sustainability continued to rise over time. Simply put, the federal finances are at a precipice. I'm going to insert this clip right here. So let's listen to his own words here, how he feels.
I think everybody should be concerned. It's a really serious day.
The report projects a sharp hike to the annual deficit from 51.7 billion last year to 68.5 billion this year.
All of which will add to the cost of living for Canadians. Why is it how is it possible that any prime minister could have been more expensive than Trudeau?
And that's what I feel like. What are we talking about? This is absolutely insane. Again, I thought that this was the finance guy. And I'm not trying to be a dick, but not working over the last couple of months while all this shit was happening. If it was so bad, why weren't you working? When most companies have to get something done and we need to come together, we work overtime. Crazy, I know. You guys get paid a lot of money in government. I don't understand why you couldn't possibly have worked overtime through the summer and did something. Didn't do anything at the beginning of the year because you're prorogued, and then couldn't do anything because you're in the middle of an election, and then got in for a month, not even, and then on summer break, and now what? You're going to work for a couple months, show us that you're going to be overspending, and then take a winter break? Because that's what's coming next, right? So I think we're okay to be a little bit pissed about this. Warnings that we've heard before. The PBO is right to raise these concerns. It's a critical part of their mandate, but we've long known these problems. The CD Howe Institute released a report from Don Drummond, Alex Lauren, and Bill Robson last July, for example, with their own estimates from 2025 to 2028 cumulative deficit reaching nearly 343 billion, very close to my estimate here that adjusts the new PBO projections. The unsustainable federal debt trajectory is also not new. Back in April, I wrote here on the Hub that the Liberal platform represented a sharp departure from even the already weak fiscal rules of the recent years. In that piece, I projected that by 2028, federal debt would reach 43.5% of its GDP, assuming the government's hope of finding efficiencies was unsuccessful. The PBO now estimates federal debt will rise to 43.7% by that same year, again, not including many of the measures committed by the platform. This is the budget warning that Canadians cannot ignore. The upcoming budget, set to be released on November 4th, will reveal whether the government has a new plan, complete with clear fiscal anchors to shift off this unsustainable path. Okay, November 4th, so we look like we know what we're going to be talking about that week. Let's see what actually, I'm going to try. I'm going to try and be positive. Y'all say that he's the banker, he's the finance guy, he did so good. So let's see. We'll find out, but this doesn't sound good. This sounds like we're going into worse places. And I'm not saying that if Pierre got in, the Conservatives got in, it would be any better, but like, how are we ever going to know when we don't even get a chance to know? You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, Liberals, again, not trying to be rude, but can we see that maybe they aren't doing the best thing? Okay, I'll wait till November 4th. What else? When do I push the goalpost next to start being critical here? Global debt risks. Canada is not alone in facing long-term fiscal challenges. The United States is in a particularly difficult position with its entire social credit trust fund projected to be depleted by the early days. European countries also face mounting fiscal pressures, with the amount of pressure they're driven by the cost of aging population, rising pension obligations, increased healthcare spending, and greater demands for long-term care. This is Sophie. For perspective, analysts typically measure fiscal sustainability by estimating how much revenue must rise or spending must fall to stabilize public debt over time. Can we not? Okay, lie down. You can lie down. Can we lie down now? Your brother did a terrible job at lying down. Can you lie down? For perspective, analysts typically measure fiscal sustainability by estimating how much revenue must rise or spending must fall to stabilize public debt over time. While results depend on assumptions and modeling choices, the EU estimates that its member countries would need adjustments worth roughly 3% of GDP. In Canadian context, that's equivalent to increasing the GST from 5% to 15%. Fortunately, such drastic steps are not required in Canada, at least not federally. Provinces are another story, with adjustments on the order of 2% or more required for many. Of course, being in good company is no comfort. If anything, widespread global indebtedness means the risks we face are larger. A debt crisis or financial disruption abroad could quickly spill across borders, making growth here more volatile. All the more reason for Canada to ensure our fiscal house is in order so we're resilient and prepare for the shocks that may come. Oh, you guys, I don't even know how to feel about this, but not great. Again, I'm not a finance girly, so obviously I'm not an economist, but I mean, at what point do we just say like, hey, what's going on? Why are we seeing the worst we've ever seen with homelessness and mental health crisis and people sick and healthcare is not doing great and all these people are sick? Like, what is truly happening here? And I'm not going to sit here and blame everything on the Liberals like I always wanted to do. I'm asking truly, and like, how do we get out of this? Because this is just not great. We're just on who we owe this money to? The fucking Decepticons? Like, what is happening here? What is happening? And again, I'm going to be hopeful that things will change. But I mean, how many years do you say that? How many years do you sit here and go, oh, it's going to change and it's going to get better, and it doesn't? And then what do you do? The next episode, I'm going to talk about some scary bills that might be coming in that I want to just read a little bit more about before I get all excited about it or hyper about it. But looking at how things are happening in the UK and the way that we can't read some certain things on the news here, that is scary. And I'm trying not to dive into the fear and manifest it more, but I also want to be realistic with it. So we will be talking about that in the next episode, some new laws and bills that they're trying to pass through when it comes to internet. Again, that will affect me. However, through the pandemic, it did affect me, but now they're course correcting. So let's see, hopefully, fingers crossed that this isn't what we think it is, but I also think it's always good to look into it. But hopefully you guys listened through that whole episode. I hope you enjoyed seeing both of my cats, my two co-hosts here today. I don't know why they're being so aggressive to come and visit, but thank you guys again so much for listening. Remember, on Mondays, we keep up with Canada, where I bring you some news in Canada. Sorry, not all of it is happy news, but I do think we need to talk about the stuff without falling victim to being in the fear loop, of course. And on Wednesdays, we have some internet insanity, and I have a story that actually is affecting us here in Canada and down in the US. Allegedly, this gang cult is no longer a thing. However, I think parents need to be super aware that this happened. I do believe that there's such thing as copycats, and I don't think that awful people on the internet just go away just because some get arrested. So I'm going to be talking about that on Wednesdays here on YouTube with Internet Insanities that are on Wednesdays. The last couple episodes, we talked about the OF model that was brutally left and beat in Dubai and her follow-up story. We talked about Kendra on the Netflix documentary a couple weeks ago. We also talked about Kendra that was in love with her psychiatrist and the grooming that he put her through. And then on this Wednesday, like I said, I have a situation and a quote unquote cult or group that has been terrorizing the West for sure. And then on Fridays on Apple, Spotify, on Rumble, I have the podcast, the Be Real Babe podcast, where I interview a ton of amazing people about their real life stories. So if you want to hear me over there, you can find me over there. And if you want to find me on social media, you can find me on TikTok or Instagram at the Be Real Babe or the Be Real Babe podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you stuck around, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye. Say bye, self. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Until next time, bye.